The taillights of his car were still glowing red when Kevin sent his reply. Two long streaks of bright red dragged through the heavy curtain of rain, slicing past my eyes like a pair of slow-moving knives. I stood frozen on the shoulder of Interstate 95, staring at my phone screen. His reply to my text was brutally short. Just one word. Okay. It felt less like the final nail in the coffin of our marriage, and more like the casual deletion of a spam email. Rainwater plastered my hair to my face, seeping deep into my clothes. The biting cold numbed my spine. Clutched in my trembling hand was a box of prescription stomach medication. Just 30 minutes earlier, Kevin had called me, groaning about severe stomach cramps. Catching the distress in his voice, I had grabbed his medicine and driven straight into the storm to find him. But the moment I pulled open the passenger door of his SUV, I saw Rachel. She was sitting in my seat, wearing a white knit dress with Kevin's tailored suit jacket draped over her shoulders. Her eyes were red, like she had just been crying. When I reached for the back door handle to get in, she suddenly covered her ears. "Kevin, the thunder is scaring me," she whimpered. Kevin instantly turned toward her, wrapping his arms around her to soothe her. My hand hovered over the door handle, paralyzed. He furrowed his brows and looked at me with sheer annoyance. "Rachel just got back to the States. Her anxiety is really bad right now. Don't trigger her." I let out a hollow laugh. Me? Triggering her? With what exactly? Rachel spoke up, her voice sickeningly sweet. "It's okay. I'll sit in the back. Please don't make Sarah mad." She knew Kevin and I had been married for 2 years, yet she deliberately called me by my first name like I was just an acquaintance. She did it because our marriage was a secret. A quiet courthouse wedding that Kevin insisted we keep off social media and away from his family. He had claimed his mother had a weak heart and couldn't handle the shock of a sudden marriage. He promised me that once his family situation stabilized, once his big corporate project wrapped up, and once Rachel completely got over their past breakup, we'd announce it to the world. I waited 2 whole years, and my reward was watching his ex-girlfriend sit in my passenger seat while I stood in the pouring rain. Kevin pulled his jacket tighter around Rachel's shoulders and glared at me. "Sarah, stop being so dramatic. The rain is blinding right now. I need to get Rachel home first." "And what about me?" I asked, my voice barely audible over the storm. He glanced at the miles of deadlocked traffic on the interstate. "Just call an Uber. I can't park here forever. Stop making things so difficult for me." Stop making things so difficult for me. I had heard that phrase countless times over the past 2 years. When I asked to attend his mother's birthday dinner, he told me to stay home so I wouldn't make things difficult. When Rachel moved back from Europe and he insisted on picking her up from JFK Airport, he told me not to make things difficult. When his extended family came to visit, he asked me to leave our apartment for the weekend so I wouldn't make things difficult. I looked down at the delicate silver band on my left ring finger. I had bought it myself on the day we signed our marriage license. Kevin had told me that wearing a flashy diamond would draw too much attention during our secret marriage phase. Back then, I was foolish enough to defend him. I thought our love was our own, and we didn't need to prove anything to anyone. Now I finally understood. It wasn't that he didn't want to show me off to others. It was that he never intended to acknowledge me in the first place. Through the rain-streaked window, Rachel looked at me. Her gaze was indifferent, like she was watching a stubborn waitress finally being dismissed from a VIP table. She reached for her seatbelt. "Let's go, Kevin. It's freezing." Kevin didn't even look at me again. The heavy car door slammed shut, sealing them inside their warm, private world. I stood there, watching the black SUV merge back into the highway traffic until it disappeared completely. The rain was so fierce I could barely keep my eyes open. My phone buzzed in my palm. A text from Kevin. "Stop acting crazy on the side of the highway. Go home, and we'll talk later." I stared at that sentence for a long time. Then, I placed the box of stomach medicine on the wet steel guardrail. I slid the wedding band off my finger, placed it next to the medicine, took a picture, and sent it to him. "Let's get a divorce." His okay came back instantly. It was so fast that I almost suspected he had been waiting for me to say it all along. A raindrop hit the screen. I wiped it away with my soaked sleeve and opened my email app. An email from the Alaska Department of Revenue was sitting quietly at the top of my inbox. "Your application for permanent out-of-state residency is in its final review stage. Please upload your finalized separation documents and voter registration transfer within 7 days. 7 days. I had been hesitating for months. I thought that surely, giving 2 years of my life to this hidden marriage would eventually thaw his cold heart. But Kevin had just made the final decision for me. I opened my notes app. Inside was a master list I had been compiling for over 6 months. Scans of our marriage certificate, a meticulous spreadsheet of our living expenses for the past 2 years, medical bills I had paid for his mother, bank transfer receipts from when Kevin asked me to cover his family's property taxes. Every single passive-aggressive text message Rachel had sent me since she returned, and every dismissive message Kevin had ever written to me. I didn't cry. I didn't call him to scream. I simply backed up the entire folder to a secure cloud drive and sent a text to my attorney, Mr. Sterling. Mr. Sterling, we can begin the divorce proceedings. He replied immediately. Are you absolutely sure, Sarah? I looked down the dark, rainy highway one last time. Yes. A second later, my best friend Chloe called. Her voice was frantic. Sarah, where are you? I thought you were dropping off medicine for Kevin? I told her my location on the interstate. She unleashed a string of colorful curses. Are you kidding me? He left you on I-95 inches a thunderstorm? He's out of his mind. He isn't crazy, I replied calmly. He just firmly believes I'll never actually leave him. Chloe fell silent for a few seconds before barking. Don't move. I'm coming to get you. I looked up at the pitch-black sky. Cars sped past me, splashing freezing gray slush onto my jeans. I shoved my phone into my pocket, the screenshot of his, "Okay, safely saved." 30 minutes later, Chloe's Honda pulled up onto the shoulder. She threw the door open, rushing out with an umbrella. The moment she saw me, her eyes welled up with tears. Sarah, how much more are you going to take? I got into her car. My body was shivering so violently I could barely buckle my seatbelt. As the car's heater blasted my face, I realized my fingertips were completely white and numb. Chloe tossed a thick towel into my lap. We're going to my place. I shook my head. No. She looked at me, stunned. I pulled out my phone and showed her the email from the Alaskan government. Take me to my apartment first. I need to get my passport, my birth certificate, and the original copy of my marriage license. Chloe stared at the screen, a slow realization dawning on her face. Without another word, she hit the gas. As we pulled off the interstate, I looked at the flooded asphalt in the rearview mirror. It looked exactly like my marriage to Kevin. From the outside, it seemed like a wide, open road. But in reality, there was never a single safe place for me to pull over and rest. It was almost midnight by the time we reached the luxury Manhattan high-rise where Kevin and I lived in secret. The door passcode was still my birthday. The lock clicked and the door swung open. The apartment was pitch dark. Kevin's expensive leather loafers were kicked off haphazardly in the entryway. His blazer was tossed over the expensive white sofa. In the kitchen sink sat the unwashed coffee mug he had used that morning. In the past, I would have instinctively washed it. Tonight, I didn't touch a thing. I walked quietly into the master bedroom and pulled a large gray suitcase from under the bed. Passport, social security card, college transcripts, my grandmother's old letters. And finally, that thin, pathetic piece of paper, our marriage certificate. I held it in my hands for a few seconds. In the attached photo we took at the courthouse, I was smiling so brightly. Kevin wasn't smiling at all. Back then, I told myself he was just awkward in front of cameras. Now I knew the truth. He was just incapable of acknowledging me. Chloe stood leaning against the bedroom doorframe, her voice low. Are you taking everything? I nodded. I'm taking everything that belongs to me. I won't touch a single thing of his. I opened the massive walk-in closet and pulled out my clothes piece by piece. Over the course of a 2-year marriage, I had surprisingly little to show for it. Kevin had strictly ordered me not to leave any noticeable traces of a woman in the apartment, just in case his mother dropped by unannounced. There wasn't a single framed photo of me in the living room. Only 2 pairs of my shoes were allowed in the entryway closet. My toothbrush and skincare were relegated to a hidden basket under the bathroom sink. In my own home, I lived like an Airbnb guest who could be evicted at a moment's notice. He had prepared for my exit from day one. I was just finally choosing to take him up on it. Before zipping the suitcase, I pulled a thick navy blue ledger from the nightstand. Chloe flipped to the first page, her face twisting in horror as she read the numbers. $15,000 for his mother's hospital stay? $8,800 for his sister's wedding gift? Why the hell are you paying $2,000 a month for his family's housekeeper? I closed the ledger. Because it was a secret marriage, my voice remained completely flat. His family couldn't know a wife existed, but my financial obligations as a wife never decreased. Chloe gritted her teeth. That's not an obligation. They treated you like a free maid and a walking ATM. I tucked the ledger safely into the suitcase. That's exactly why it all ends tonight. At 1 a.m., I rolled my luggage out of the apartment. Before closing the front door, I looked at the sleek entryway console table. Kevin's spare Audi key was resting on the marble tray. I used to dream of the day he would publicly hand me that key and tell the world we shared a life. Now, the thought just made me nauseous. I placed my apartment keycard right next to it. I pulled the door shut, listening to the heavy electronic lock engage. My phone vibrated again. Kevin had finally sent a second message. Sarah, enough is enough. Don't push my buttons. I stood in the elevator lobby, staring at those words. I didn't reply. I simply went into my settings and added his number to my blocked list. As the elevator doors slid shut, I heard myself whisper into the empty metal box. The only one who has had enough is me. I didn't look back that night. But what I didn't know was that 2 hours later, when Kevin finally dropped Rachel off and returned to the high-rise, all that awaited him was a dead, silent apartment and a cold plastic keycard sitting on a marble tray. The next morning, Kevin tried calling me 12 times. I didn't answer a single one. I was sitting at Chloe's dining table, eating a warm bowl of oatmeal she had made for me. It was rich with cinnamon and brown sugar. She sat across from me, only letting out a breath of relief when I finished the entire bowl. My phone screen lit up repeatedly. Kevin Davis. Kevin Davis. Always him. His calling patterns were incredibly predictable. Usually, if I called him and he didn't pick up by the second ring, he would shoot back an aggressive text telling me he was busy and not to bother him. Now that it was his turn to be ignored, he seemed to have forgotten his own rules. I flipped the phone face down and let it buzz against the wood. Chloe raised an eyebrow. Look who finally grew a spine. I smiled, though it didn't reach my eyes. It wasn't that I wasn't hurting. It was just that once you cross a certain threshold of pain, your mind becomes terrifyingly calm. At 9 a.m., Attorney Sterling emailed me the first draft of the divorce settlement. I skimmed through the pages. Assets to remain separate. Total reimbursement demanded within 30 days for all documented loans and expenses paid to the Davis family during the marriage. Voluntary forfeiture of my residency rights to the Manhattan apartment, provided Kevin cooperates with the removal of any remaining trivial items. No children. No joint debt. The very last clause was one I had explicitly drafted myself. Both parties are strictly prohibited from interfering in the other's personal life, under the guise of marital ties. I stared at that sentence for a moment before typing back, approved. Chloe leaned over my shoulder. Are you seriously not going after the apartment? I shook my head. He bought it before we got married. I only want back what's mine. Chloe sighed heavily. You're drawing the lines too cleanly. He's just going to use that against you. I used to draw lines and never enforce them, I said quietly. Things are different now. Before I could even set the phone down, a text popped up on my screen. It was from my mother-in-law, Mrs. Davis. Sarah, get to Mount Sinai Hospital this morning. Kevin is swamped at work, and Rachel's anxiety is too bad for her to sit in a waiting room. I stared at the words, Rachel's anxiety is too bad. Suddenly, I felt like laughing. Last night, because Rachel's anxiety was too bad, I was left to freeze in a thunderstorm. Today, because Rachel's anxiety was too bad, I was expected to play the dutiful nurse. In the Davis family ecosystem, Rachel just had to act fragile and weak, while I had to be the tough, unbothered workhorse who handled all the dirty work. I didn't reply. A minute later, she sent another text. I know you are fighting with Kevin, but you don't take it out on your elders. A picture of her hospital registration ticket followed. In the past, a message like that would have sent me into a panic. I would have dropped my laptop, hailed a cab, and rushed to the hospital. I knew her medical history better than the doctors. I knew exactly which beta blockers she took, what time her blood pressure spiked, and which exact billing window to wait at. Kevin didn't know any of this. All he ever did was call me and say, "Sarah, go handle my mom," and I would do it. Not this time. I opened my banking app, navigated to the auto pay settings, and permanently canceled the recurring payments for Mrs. Davis's medical bills. I took a screenshot and emailed it to Attorney Sterling. "Please add this to the ledger of terminated financial support." Chloe watched me, her eyes gleaming with absolute pride. Savage. After 10 minutes of silence, Mrs. Davis lost her patience and called me directly. I answered. Her voice dripped with condescension. "Sarah, what's wrong with you? Ignoring my calls and my texts? Are you looking for me, Mrs. Davis?" I asked evenly. The line went dead silent. "What did you just call me?" I used to call her Mom. Even though she had never once introduced me as her daughter-in-law to anyone in her country club circle, I still forced myself to call her Mom. "Mrs. Davis," I repeated clearly. Her voice instantly dropped to a hostile hiss. "Are you taking your little marital spat out on me? You know perfectly well my heart condition can't handle stress." "I'm well aware," I replied. "Which is exactly why I compiled your entire medical history, prescription list, and billing codes into a PDF and emailed it to your son this morning. From now on, Kevin will be escorting you." Mrs. Davis scoffed like I had just told a hilarious joke. "What does a man like him know about navigating a hospital?" "He's your son," I said coldly. "He's far more qualified than I am." Silence hung heavy on the line. Then, lowering her voice into a vicious whisper, she said, "Don't forget your place, Sarah. The only reason you were even allowed to marry into this family is because Kevin protected you. Keeping the marriage a secret was for your own good. If you think causing a scene will force us to announce you publicly, you are severely mistaken." My fingers stopped tapping the table. So that was it. For 2 years, they truly believed that my ultimate goal in life was simply to earn the grand prize of their public approval. Maybe it was, once, but not anymore. "Don't flatter yourself," I said. "The divorce papers will be delivered to Kevin today. You will never have to worry about announcing me to anyone." Her voice spiked an octave. "Divorce? Who are you trying to threaten?" I hung up. I didn't owe her an explanation. 10 minutes later, Kevin's number popped up on the screen. He was calling from a burner phone. I accepted the call. His voice was trembling with suppressed rage. "Sarah, I never agreed to a divorce. You literally texted, 'Okay' last night," I reminded him. He scoffed loudly. "You actually took that seriously?" I was annoyed and driving in a storm. I looked out the window. On Chloe's balcony, a small potted mint plant that had been battered down by last night's storm was slowly standing upright in the morning sun. "Do I sound like I'm joking, Kevin?" He went quiet for 2 seconds. When he spoke again, his tone was freezing. "Where are you right now?" "That's none of your business." "Sarah Miller." He used my full name. "Don't forget, all your stuff is still in my apartment." I glanced at the massive gray suitcase sitting by the door. "I moved it all out last night." The line went completely dead. I could perfectly picture him standing in the middle of our pristine living room, staring at the empty walk-in closet, the missing toothbrush, and the plastic key card sitting on the marble tray. After a long pause, he asked, "What the hell is this supposed to mean?" "It means exactly what it looks like," I said. "I'm gone." His breathing grew heavy. "You're throwing a tantrum over that tiny little misunderstanding last night?" "That tiny little misunderstanding." I closed my eyes. "You abandoned your wife on the side of a busy interstate in a thunderstorm. I left the stomach medicine you begged for on the guardrail. I took off my wedding ring. You texted okay? I accepted it. None of this is a tiny misunderstanding, Kevin. It was the final straw." As if stung by my words, he snapped. "Then what do you want from me? Do you want me to drive over there right now and pick you up? Do you want an apology?" I didn't answer. Because even now, he viewed apologizing as a charity handout, not a basic requirement of human decency. "The divorce agreement has been sent to your email," I said quietly. "Sign it." And I hung up the phone. A moment later, Rachel sent me a picture message. In the photo, she was sitting in the passenger seat of Kevin's car again. A steaming cup of Starbucks coffee rested in the cup holder. Her caption was just one line. "Sarah, It rained so hard last night. Did you make it home safe? Kevin said you were probably just blowing off steam and would take a cab back. I stared at the picture for exactly 2 seconds. I didn't reply. I took a screenshot, saved it to a folder labeled Rachel's harassment, and locked my screen. Chloe, who had been reading over my shoulder, was practically vibrating with rage. The absolute sheer audacity of this homewrecker, Chloe yelled. I picked up my coffee mug. She's not just being audacious, she is testing the waters. She wants to see if I will swallow my pride and stay quiet like I always do. So how are you going to hit back? Chloe demanded. I opened my email and forwarded the screenshot directly to Attorney Sterling. I'm going to hit back in the only language Kevin's family understands. At 3 p.m. sharp, Attorney Sterling officially served Kevin with the divorce papers and the attached exhibit of evidence. Exhibit C was the picture of Rachel sitting in his passenger seat. Less than 5 minutes later, Kevin's burner phone called me again. I ignored it. He immediately switched to texting. Dragging Rachel into this legal mess? Who the hell do you think you are? I read the text and actually laughed out loud. It all made perfect sense now. His biggest concern wasn't that his wife was abandoned on a highway. It wasn't that I had filed for divorce. It wasn't that our marriage was ending. His absolute biggest concern was that I had inconvenienced Rachel. I sent him my one and only reply for the day. The second she decided to sit in my passenger seat and mock me, she dragged herself into it. Then I powered off my phone. That night, Chloe and I went out for hot pot. The spicy broth bubbled fiercely, steam rising into the cold New York air. Right in the middle of eating a slice of beef, a tear suddenly rolled down my cheek. Chloe handed me a napkin but wisely stayed quiet. I wiped my face and dumped more vegetables into the pot. I wasn't crying out of regret. I was crying because I was finally allowing myself to admit how badly I had been hurt. Toward the end of dinner, Chloe asked gently, "So, what's the actual game plan?" I pulled a printed itinerary from my tote bag. Tomorrow, I go to City Hall. The day after, I meet with the legal team to finalize the asset division. The day after that, I upload my final out-of-state residency transfer to the Alaskan government portal. Chloe's jaw dropped. Wait, you're moving that fast? I showed her the government email on my iPad. Actually, this isn't fast at all. I have had this exit strategy ready for months. I just never had the guts to pull the trigger. Kevin gave me the final push I needed last night. At 11 p.m., Kevin sent another text to my iPad via iMessage. "Sarah, I'm giving you exactly 24 hours to cool off." I didn't reply. I had been cooling off for 2 years. Now, it wasn't my turn to cool off. It was his turn to learn how to live with the consequences. City Hall was packed the next morning. I sat in the sterile waiting area, clutching a manila folder filled with documents. The red digital numbers on the now serving screen ticked up slowly. Chloe had tagged along, holding 2 massive cups of hot matcha lattes. She kept glancing at the thick folder in my lap, still looking like she couldn't believe this was real. "Are you seriously legally changing your domicile state to Alaska?" she whispered. I nodded. "It's required for my permanent residency tax status. My new employer verified my contract. My housing is secured in Fairbanks. All I need is this sworn affidavit terminating my New York residency." Chloe kept her voice low. "You never once mentioned this job offer to him?" I gripped the edge of the folder tightly. I did, exactly once. 6 months ago, an independent documentary studio out of Anchorage offered me a massive long-term editing contract. I was so excited, I printed the offer letter and showed it to him. Do you know what he said? Chloe shook her head. He said Alaska was too far and completely unrealistic. I told him I could just try it out for a year. He looked at me and said, "If you leave, who is going to take care of my mother?" I fell silent after that. Because in Kevin's grand master plan, my life was permanently subordinate to his family's convenience. I could stay up until 3:00 a.m. editing his corporate presentations. I could burn all my PTO to sit in waiting rooms for his mother's cardiology appointments. I could vacate my own home when his snobby relatives visited. But I wasn't allowed to live the life I actually wanted. I never brought up the Alaska job again. Instead, I quietly gathered the paperwork, piece by piece, like a prisoner secretly digging a tunnel out of a cell with a spoon. Now, that tunnel had finally broken through to the surface. Number 412, the clerk called out. I walked up to the glass window. The clerk scanned my documents and glanced up at me, filing for a permanent out-of-state domicile transfer. Are you completing this voluntarily? Yes. Your current marital status on file is still listed as married, the clerk noted. I didn't miss a beat. Divorce proceedings have been initiated. The legal notice from my attorney is attached on page 3. The clerk skimmed the legal letter and nodded. All right. Let's draft the affidavit. You will need to update your marital status with the Alaskan County Clerk once the decree is finalized. While I was signing the massive stack of papers, my phone vibrated relentlessly in my pocket. Kevin. I ignored it. The clerk handed me a stamped receipt. Keep this safe. You will need to upload the digital copy to the Alaska portal. I took the thick paper. Suddenly my fingers felt stiff. It wasn't fear. It was just the overwhelming realization that this was real. I was meticulously, legally, and permanently erasing myself from my past life. When we walked out of City Hall, the sky was overcast and gray. Chloe handed me the hot matcha. Congratulations, Sarah Miller. I took a sip. It was piping hot and perfectly sweet. As soon as we got into the car, Attorney Sterling called. Mr. Davis's legal team has responded. And? I asked. He's stubbornly refusing to sign the agreement, Sterling said smoothly. He is demanding a face-to-face meeting with you before he agrees to any terms. I scoffed. He's stalling. My thoughts exactly, Sterling agreed. He hasn't fully grasped the reality of the divorce yet. He thinks he can use a meeting to pressure you into backing down. Absolutely not. All communication goes strictly through you. Sterling paused for a moment. There is one more thing. Kevin's mother called my office this morning. She stated that since you failed to fulfill your wifely duties during the marriage, she intends to make sure you are thrown out onto the street with absolutely nothing. Chloe slammed her hands against the steering wheel, furious, but I remained perfectly calm. Send them the ledger, I said. I had been a professional documentary video editor for years. My entire career revolved around catching tiny mistakes, organizing massive files, and logging timestamps. Missing a detail was my biggest fear. So naturally, I had meticulously logged every single financial transaction in my marriage. Every dollar, every bank transfer, every favor. The $15,000 I paid out of pocket for Mrs. Davis's VIP hospital room. The $8,800 check I wrote on Kevin's behalf for his sister Amanda's wedding because he had maxed out his credit cards. The $2,000 monthly salary for his family's private housekeeper. Even the $150 premium floral arrangement Kevin asked me to order to welcome Rachel back to America, claiming he just wanted to be a good host. I recorded it all. At the time, I thought I was just keeping a household budget. Now, that ledger was paving my road to freedom. That afternoon, we sat in Attorney Sterling's polished mahogany office. He spread the documents across the conference table. Sarah, this case is not legally complex. The only difficulty is that the opposing party is stubbornly refusing to cooperate. He will cooperate, I said coldly. Sterling looked up. I slid a pristine white folder across the table. Inside were printed copies of Rachel's taunting texts, the picture of her in the passenger seat, Kevin's dismissive okay message, and a 2-year backlog of texts where Kevin aggressively demanded I hide our marriage from the public. The Davis family cares about their high society reputation more than oxygen, I explained. They don't care if they destroyed my life, but they are absolutely terrified of their country club friends finding out they treated a secret wife like an unpaid servant. Sterling let out a low chuckle. You know your enemy well. I used to protect them, I said softly. When you love someone, you naturally want to hide their flaws from the world. But the second he left me to freeze on that highway, I lost all obligation to protect his reputation. By evening, Kevin had tracked down Chloe's apartment building. We didn't go down. Chloe looked through the peephole, came back, and rolled her eyes. He's standing out there in the freezing cold like he is the tragic lead in a rom-com. Too little, too late, buddy. I sat on the sofa, organizing my digital files for the Alaska move. The buzzer rang endlessly. Chloe looked ready to march down there with a baseball bat, but I stopped her. Don't open it. My phone buzzed. A text from Kevin. I know you are in there. Come down, Sarah. Don't humiliate me in front of your friends. I stared at the message. Typical Kevin. He was terrified of being humiliated by standing outside a door, but he felt absolutely zero shame abandoning me on the I-95 shoulder in a thunderstorm. I didn't reply. 10 minutes later, the buzzing stopped. Chloe checked the window. He drove off. Before I could even relax, another text came through. I'm waiting at your house. My stomach dropped. My house. He meant the old, run-down Brooklyn brownstone my late parents had left me. The house had been vacant for years, storing old furniture and my grandmother's antiques. Kevin knew the address, but he had never once offered to go there with me. He always complained the neighborhood was too sketchy and parking was a nightmare. And now he was there. Chloe tensed up. I'm calling the NYPD. Not yet, I said. I texted my old neighbor, Mr. Henderson, asking him to check the porch. 10 minutes later, Mr. Henderson texted back a photo. Kevin was standing on the rotting wooden porch. In his hands was a massive bouquet of white roses. I looked at the flowers, and a bitter memory rushed back. On our first wedding anniversary, I had timidly asked if we could buy a small bouquet. Kevin had coldly rejected the idea, saying that since we were already married, performing useless romantic stunts was a waste of money. But when Rachel flew back into JFK, he put her in his passenger seat, bought her a hot latte, and handed her white roses. It wasn't that Kevin didn't know how to be romantic. It was that he never believed I was worth the effort. I texted Mr. Henderson back. Ignore him. He can stand there until he freezes. By 9 p.m., Kevin was still on the porch. He sent me a selfie of himself standing in the dark. I'm right here. Come back so we can fix this. I forwarded the text to Attorney Sterling. Please send a formal cease and desist notice. Tell him to immediately vacate my property and cease harassment. Sterling worked fast. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. I answered. Kevin's voice was hoarse and frantic. Sarah, did you seriously just have a lawyer threaten me with a restraining order? I'm your husband. Not for much longer, I said. His breathing hitched. How far are you going to take this tantrum? Kevin, I said softly. I filed my permanent relocation paperwork with the state today. Dead silence on the other end. What does that mean? He asked, his voice trembling. I enunciated every single word. My move to Alaska is finalized. You can't find me not because I am hiding at a friend's house to pout. You can't find me because I'm permanently erasing myself from your life. The only sound on the phone was his ragged breathing. I didn't say another word and hung up. That night, Kevin stood on the porch of the Brooklyn house until dawn. While he froze outside, I sat in Chloe's warm apartment and uploaded the final PDF documents to the Alaskan portal. When I clicked the submit button, a final confirmation prompt popped up on the screen. Are you sure you want to finalize this submission? I clicked yes. The bright white light of the screen washed over my face. The storm, I realized, was finally over. Kevin didn't truly panic until the morning of the third day. That was when it finally clicked in his brain that I hadn't just packed a bag, I had systematically dismantled my entire existence in New York. I had canceled my primary phone number. I wiped my social media clean and locked the accounts. I transitioned my job at the production company to a 100% remote, Alaska-based contract. I gave the keys to the Brooklyn house to Chloe to manage. Any mutual friends Kevin managed to contact received the exact same automated-style reply from me. Due to personal reasons, I cannot disclose any details at this time. He couldn't find me. And to a man like Kevin Davis, losing control was vastly more terrifying than a divorce. He was used to being the puppet master. He was used to me answering his calls by the second ring. He was used to me dropping everything and sprinting to Mount Sinai if he casually mentioned his mother had a headache. If he threw a temper tantrum for 3 days, he was used to me quietly making him a home-cooked meal to break the ice. Now, every single cord had been brutally slashed. For the first time in his life, he realized I wasn't a piece of furniture bolted to the floor of his apartment. I was a human being with legs, and I had walked away. That morning, I sat at the terminal at JFK Airport, waiting for my flight to Fairbanks. Before heading through security, Chloe crushed me in a massive hug. Text me the second you land, she ordered, her eyes shining with unshed tears. I nodded. She forced a tough girl smirk. And don't look back. Only dogs go back to their vomit. I laughed out loud. I won't. The boarding announcement echoed through the terminal. I grabbed my carry-on and headed toward the gate. Right before I scanned my ticket, I turned on my old New York phone one last time. There were dozens of frantic texts from Kevin. "Where are you? Sarah, pick up the phone. Are you seriously throwing our marriage away over Rachel? I told you, she and I are just friends." That night on the highway was an emergency. What the hell are you even going to do in Alaska by yourself? Don't do something you're going to regret. The absolute latest text had come in at 8:30 a.m. My mom was just admitted to the hospital again. I stared at that sentence, my thumb hovering over the screen. In the past, reading that would have sent me into a blind panic. I would have texted back frantically. Which hospital? Which floor? Did they run an EKG? This time, I calmly opened my email, attached the massive PDF of Mrs. Davis's medical history, and forwarded it to Kevin. I added one single line of text. "You are her son. Act like it." Then, I shut the phone down completely and tossed it into my bag. As the plane took off, the sprawling concrete jungle of New York City faded into a blurry gray patch beneath the clouds. I didn't cry. I just leaned my head against the cold airplane window and let out a long, shuddering breath. 12 hours later, I landed in Fairbanks, Alaska. The air outside the tiny airport was shockingly crisp and freezing. I dragged my suitcase to a waiting taxi and gave the driver the address of my pre-rented cabin. The sky was an endless expanse of deep, bruised purple, and snow-capped pines lined the empty highways. When I finally swapped my SIM card, a barrage of notifications flooded in. Messages from Chloe, updates from Attorney Sterling, and a massive email from Kevin. The subject line read, "Please come back." I ignored the email and texted Chloe, "I'm safe." Then I checked in with Sterling about the legal filings. Finally, I opened Kevin's email. It was practically an essay. He wrote about how he hadn't slept in days. He listed all the places he had driven to, looking for me, our apartment, the Brooklyn house, Chloe's place, my office. He claimed he had no idea I was planning to move across the country. He said married couples shouldn't play these cruel disappearing games. He promised that if I just came back to New York, he would explain everything about Rachel. I stopped reading halfway through. Explain? He truly believed that a slick explanation could act as an eraser for my trauma, but I didn't need explanations anymore. I only cared about results. I typed a single sentence in reply. "Direct all communications regarding the divorce to Attorney Sterling." I hit send, then set my email to auto-reply. That night, I unpacked in my small Alaskan cabin. It was incredibly modest. A single bed, a wooden desk, one large window looking out at a street lamp illuminating falling snow. There were no expensive leather loafers kicked off by the door. No stacks of medical bills for a mother-in-law who hated me. No photos of Rachel. No unwashed coffee mugs I was obligated to clean. I took a boiling hot shower, put on fresh flannel pajamas, and pulled the silver wedding band out of my bag. The metal looked dull, probably tarnished from the rain on I-95. I found a heavy manila envelope and dropped the ring inside, along with the plastic key card to the Manhattan apartment and the spare Audi key. I addressed it to Kevin Davis. Under the return address, I wrote Sarah Miller. I didn't write Mrs. Davis. When I woke up the next day, it was already afternoon in New York. Attorney Sterling had sent an update. Kevin is still refusing to negotiate the financial terms, but he agreed to meet this afternoon to discuss the parameters. I texted back, "I'm not attending. He is demanding a mandatory Zoom call with you present," Sterling replied. "Then the meeting is cancelled." Sterling simply replied, "Understood." I got out of bed and brewed a fresh pot of coffee. Just as the water started boiling, Chloe texted me, "Oh, Meg, Kevin actually barged into your old production office today. He looked completely unhinged. Miss Parker told him to his face that you had legally relocated out of state and transferred to a remote contract. She said he literally turned to stone in the lobby." Attached was a blurry photo someone had secretly snapped. Kevin was standing next to my old empty editing desk. Everything was gone except for a small potted pothos plant I hadn't been able to take on the plane. I used to take meticulous care of it, but now the leaves were already turning yellow. Kevin was staring down at the dying plant, his shoulders rigid and stiff. I stared at the photo for a few seconds before closing it. My heart didn't ache for him. I knew he hadn't suddenly fallen madly in love with me overnight. He was just a man having a meltdown because the reliable appliance he had kept in the corner for 2 years had suddenly unplugged itself and walked out the door. That afternoon, Rachel sent me another text on the new number she somehow dug up. "Sarah, I think you're severely misunderstanding the situation between Kevin and me. I just moved back from Europe. He's the only real friend I have in the city." I read it, took a screenshot, and immediately forwarded it to Sterling. She sent another one. "You making this massive scene is completely exhausting, Kevin. He is under so much stress." I finally typed a reply. "If he's so exhausted, you should do a better job taking care of him." After I sent those words, she went dead silent. 10 minutes later, she replied, "What's that supposed to mean?" I didn't answer. Stolen crowns always look dazzling until you actually sit on the throne and realize it comes with taxes. Taking my place didn't just mean riding shotgun in an Audi. It meant spending 12 hours a day in Mount Sinai waiting rooms. It meant swallowing the vicious insults of Mrs. Davis. It meant catering to Kevin's wealthy, snobby relatives. It meant absorbing Kevin's explosive temper tantrums when things went wrong. I did that grueling job for 2 years. Now, it was her turn to clock in. By 9 p.m. New York time, Attorney Sterling sent me Kevin's counter-revisions to the divorce agreement. Kevin explicitly refused to reimburse the financial debts. His legal justification? The funds were utilized for joint marital living expenses. Sterling asked for my input. I opened the PDF of my ledger and highlighted specific line items in bright red. Private VIP hospital suite for mother-in-law. Not a joint marital expense. $8,800 wedding gift. Check for sister-in-law. Not a joint marital expense. Salary for Davis. Family's private housekeeper. Not a joint marital expense. Premium white roses purchased to welcome Rachel Hayes. Absolutely not a joint marital expense. I emailed the highlighted document back. Sterling replied instantly, crystal clear. 30 minutes later, Kevin texted me. "Sarah, are you seriously going to nickel and dime me over family expenses now?" I stared at the text, suddenly remembering the week we got married. I had excitedly bought a budget planner and suggested we track our household expenses together. Kevin had scoffed, telling me that married couples didn't need to be so petty and transactional. Yet, whenever I paid for his family, he felt no need to calculate. But the second he was asked to pay me back, suddenly I was the one being petty. I texted back, "I'm not nickel and diming you now. I have been keeping the receipts since day one." He didn't reply again. That night, a gentle snow began to fall over Fairbanks. It was a light, powdery drift. I stood by the frosted window, watching the snowflakes dance under the yellow street lamp. My phone lit up on the desk. A text from an unknown number, but I knew exactly who it was. "Where the hell are you?" I stared at the sentence. I didn't delete it. I didn't reply. I just took a screenshot, dropped it into a folder, and named the file, Day 1 of him not finding me. On my third day in Alaska, I went to the local DMV and municipal office to finalize my residency. The clerk called my name, Sarah Miller. I walked up to the counter. The clerk reviewed my passport, my employment verification, and my new lease agreement. Finally, he handed me a temporary Alaskan state ID. "Welcome to your new life in Alaska, ma'am," he said with a warm smile. Such a simple phrase. Yet I took the plastic card and stared at it for a very long time. My new life. I wasn't Mrs. Davis. I wasn't the secret, hidden wife. I wasn't the obedient, invisible punching bag for a wealthy New York family. I was just Sarah Miller. I snapped a picture of the ID and texted it to Chloe. She replied with 10 exclamation marks. "Baby, you are free." I laughed and put my phone away. That afternoon, I went to meet the director of the documentary studio I was contracting for. Her name was Emma, a brilliant woman in her 50s. We had worked remotely for a year, but we had never met in person. She knew my editing skills were flawless, but she knew nothing about the train wreck of my marriage. She gave me a tour of the rustic, wood-paneled editing bays. "The studio isn't massive, but it's quiet," Emma said. "You only need to be on site 3 days a week. The rest you can do from your cabin." "It's perfect," I said, nodding. Emma looked at me closely. "You look exhausted, Sarah." I didn't try to hide it. I just ended a very long, very draining relationship. She didn't pry. She just offered a warm smile. Then you need something hot in your stomach. She walked me down the snowy street to a tiny local diner and ordered me a massive bowl of clam chowder. When the steaming bowl was placed in front of me, I suddenly thought of the stomach medicine. That night on the highway, I had driven through a thunderstorm to bring him medicine, and his response was to give my seat to Rachel and abandon me. Human decency is actually very easy to measure. Someone who doesn't care about you will leave you on a highway in a storm. Someone who does care about you will buy you a bowl of hot soup just because you look tired. This wasn't even love. It was just basic human kindness. And for 2 years, I had to hallucinate that basic kindness just to survive my marriage. When I got back to the cabin that night, I opened my laptop and continued organizing the divorce exhibits. Sterling sent an update. Kevin's legal team is softening, but he is still aggressively demanding a face-to-face meeting with you. Denied, I typed back. If he has something to say, tell him to put it in writing. 10 minutes later, an email from Kevin landed in my inbox. It was surprisingly short. Sarah, I admit I handled that night on the highway poorly, but for you to suddenly move out of state, suddenly change your residency, and suddenly file for a brutal divorce? Did you even think about me for a single second? I stared at the word suddenly. Suddenly? Showing him the Alaska job offer 6 months ago wasn't sudden. Sitting in dead silence every time his mother humiliated me wasn't sudden. Asking him to set boundaries when Rachel started sending me taunting pictures wasn't sudden. The only thing that was sudden was him finally realizing I was done taking his abuse. I opened a blank Word document and began typing a chronological timeline of every major event in our 2-year marriage. Item 1. Courthouse wedding day. Kevin demands the marriage be kept a secret indefinitely. Item 2. Month 3. Mother-in-law invites me to a country club dinner, strictly introducing me to her friends as Kevin's co-worker. Item 3. Month 7. Kevin's birthday. Rachel sends a romantic gift from Europe. Kevin locks himself in his office all night. Item 4. Rachel returns to New York. Kevin cancels 3 consecutive date nights to help an old friend settle in. Item 5. The I-95 thunderstorm incident. The OK text. Next to every single item, I attach the corresponding text screenshots, bank receipts, and dates. This wasn't a manifesto of my grievances, it was a bulletproof legal document proving cause and effect. At 11 p.m., Mrs. Davis sent me a 3-minute-long voice memo. I didn't even bother listening to it. I ran it through an audio-to-text app. Sarah, I know you are throwing a fit, but as a woman, you can't afford to be this petty and calculating in a marriage. Kevin is willing to lower his head and take you back, which is incredibly generous of him. You're out in the middle of nowhere with no friends and no connections. Stop causing a scene and fly back to New York immediately. As for Rachel, she is just an old friend. If you keep obsessing over her, you are the one who is going to look like a jealous fool. I read the transcript, exported it as a PDF, forwarded it to Attorney Sterling, and then finally texted her back. Mrs. Davis, I'm never coming back. If your heart condition flares up, please contact your son. She replied instantly. Calling me Mrs. Davis? Are you trying to put me in an early grave? I typed back with icy calm. Divorce proceedings are fully underway. Formality is required. Then, I permanently blocked her number. The next morning, I got a notification that the FedEx package containing the wedding band and the apartment keys had been successfully delivered to Kevin's office. A few minutes later, my phone rang. I answered it. His voice was wrecked. What is this ring supposed to mean? I spread butter on a piece of toast, holding the phone between my shoulder and ear. I'm returning it. I didn't even buy that ring, he blurted out. My hand stopped. Wow, he actually remembered that he hadn't bought it. He remembered that I had to buy my own wedding band. Which is exactly why I'm taking it back, I said. But I don't want it anymore. So you can throw it away. His breathing turned ragged. Sarah, do you really have to be this ruthless? Do you have no heart at all? I let out a dry, breathy laugh. You're asking me about my heart? I put the butter knife down. Kevin, when you told me to call an Uber on a flooded highway, did you have a heart? When you wrapped your jacket around Rachel and put her in my seat, did you have a heart? When you texted me okay to a divorce, did you have a heart? The line went dead silent. Don't ask me if I have a heart, I continued softly. My heart was eaten alive by you, piece by piece, for 2 years. He lowered his voice to a desperate whisper. Sarah, I swear to God, there is nothing going on with Rachel and me. She just went through a terrible breakup, her anxiety is through the roof, and I was just trying to help her stand on her own 2 feet. You helped her so much you had to put her in my passenger seat? I asked. He had nothing to say to that. You helped her so much you had to leave your wife in a thunderstorm? I pushed. Silence again. Kevin, you aren't stupid, I said coldly. You knew exactly what you were doing. You just bet your entire life on the assumption that I would always tolerate it. And I hung up. For 2 days after that phone call, Kevin went completely dark. I assumed he was finally sitting down with his lawyers to process the divorce. But on the 3rd day, Chloe sent me a frantic text. Code red. Your psycho mother-in-law just marched into your old production office. She brought 2 of her snobby country club friends. She is screaming in the lobby that you conned the Davis family out of thousands of dollars, abandoned her while she was deathly ill, and fled the state like a fugitive. I stared at the screen, completely unbothered. The Davis family's ultimate defense mechanism was always playing the victim and twisting reality. What do we do? Chloe texted. I opened my laptop, converted the massive financial ledger into a clean PDF, and titled it, Financial Expenditures and Reimbursement Log. Sarah Miller, Kevin Davis marriage. I emailed it to Attorney Sterling with a simple instruction. You have my full authorization to show this to anyone. In fact, if she keeps screaming in the lobby, print it out and hand a copy to everyone in the building. A few minutes later, Sterling replied, with pleasure. I stood up and walked to the window of my cabin. The distant Alaskan mountains were majestic and covered in snow. The wind howled against the glass. No one in Fairbanks knew who the Davis family was. They had 0 power here. For 2 years, the title of Mrs. Davis brought me nothing but humiliation and pain. Today, I was going to bury that title for good. Mrs. Davis was putting on an Oscar-worthy performance in my old office lobby. She had demanded to speak to my former boss, Miss Parker. She wailed that I was a gold-digging orphan who married into their prestigious family and bled them dry. She cried that Kevin gave me everything, yet I fled the state over a tiny argument. She clutched her chest, claiming her heart was failing and her evil daughter-in-law had left her to die. If this had happened a month ago, I would have been terrified. I would have rushed out, handed her water, apologized profusely, and begged her to keep her voice down. But I was in Alaska now. Her theatrical performance was playing to a crowd of cynical New York media professionals who didn't care about her country club status. Miss Parker, a hardened New York executive who took 0 nonsense from anyone, crossed her arms and let Mrs. Davis finish crying. Then, she asked one single question. You claim Sarah Miller conned your family out of money. Do you have a single shred of proof? Mrs. Davis stammered. Proof? She is my son's wife. Our family money is her money. She stole from us. You also claim she abandoned you while you were ill, Miss Parker continued, her voice like ice. Did you have a legal medical proxy or a paid caregiving contract with Sarah? Mrs. Davis turned red. I'm her mother-in-law. That's fascinating, Miss Parker noted, tilting her head. Because just last year at our corporate gala, your son Kevin explicitly introduced Sarah to our clients as a freelance associate. You kept the marriage entirely secret. So, Mrs. Davis, are you here screaming in my lobby to finally publicly claim her as your daughter-in-law, or are you just here to harass my employees? Mrs. Davis was struck dumb. Chloe recounted the entire scene to me later, saying Miss Parker looked like a 10-foot-tall titan destroying a peasant, but the real kill shot came 10 minutes later. Attorney Sterling strolled into the lobby holding a stack of freshly printed packets. He slammed the financial ledger down on the glass coffee table in front of Mrs. Davis. Page 1. $3,500 paid by Sarah Miller for Mrs. Davis's private hospital suite. Page 2. $1,200 paid by Sarah Miller for Mrs. Davis's cardiology copays. Page 3. $2,500 paid by Sarah Miller for Mrs. Davis's premium medications. Page 4. 3 consecutive months of $2,000 salary for the Davis family housekeeper, paid by Sarah Miller. Page 5. $8,800. Check for Kevin's sister's wedding, signed by Sarah Miller. Every single transaction had the date, the bank routing number, and the recipient clearly highlighted. Miss Parker flipped to the last page and raised an eyebrow at Mrs. Davis. You said Sarah conned you out of money? According to these bank records, it looks like Sarah was funding your entire family's lifestyle. Did you come here to pay her back? The lobby was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Mrs. Davis's face cycled through shades of red, purple, and ghostly white. One of her country club friends awkwardly tried to save face. Well, family shouldn't keep such petty track of money. Attorney Sterling offered a lethal, shark-like smile. If they are family, why was Sarah's identity hidden like a dirty secret for 2 years? No one said a word. If you refuse to publicly acknowledge her, Sterling continued, his voice ringing through the lobby, why are you demanding she perform the unpaid labor of a dutiful wife? And if you demand that labor, why are you screaming that she has no right to demand her own money back during a divorce? Cornered by facts and legally documented receipts, Mrs. Davis grabbed her designer purse and practically fled the building in disgrace. That night, Kevin sent me a text. Just one line. Are you happy now? Did you really have to humiliate my mother like that? I typed back. When she marched into my place of work to destroy my career and reputation, did it ever cross your mind that she was humiliating me? He replied instantly. You used to never be this vicious. I stared at his message. He was right. I used to be the ultimate peacemaker. I swallowed my pride to protect the Davis family's precious reputation. When Mrs. Davis told me not to call her Mom in public, I smiled and nodded. When Rachel posted flirty pictures from his car, I gaslit myself into thinking I was just being insecure. But humans don't stay stupid forever. I replied, the old me was an idiot. Kevin never texted back. But the collapse of the Davis family was only just beginning. With my autopay canceled and me thousands of miles away, absolute chaos descended on their household. Nobody took Mrs. Davis to her cardiology checkups. Kevin was genuinely drowning in corporate work and had no idea how to navigate her complex medical portal, so he was forced to hire a premium private healthcare aide. The aide cost $150 a day. Mrs. Davis constantly complained the aide was too expensive and verbally abused Kevin for being terrible with money. Because I stopped paying the housekeeper's $2,000 salary, the housekeeper quit immediately. Kevin's father didn't know how to boil water, and Mrs. Davis refused to lift a finger. The pristine family estate turned into a disaster zone within a week. When Kevin's sister, Amanda, brought her kids over for Sunday dinner and found the kitchen trashed and no food prepared, she threw a fit. Mrs. Davis snapped at her. When Sarah was here, I never had to worry about a single dish being out of place, Mrs. Davis shrieked. The entire dining room went dead silent. Amanda crossed her arms and muttered, Then maybe you shouldn't have treated her like garbage. Mrs. Davis glared at her daughter. What do you know? You can never spoil a woman who marries into money. If you give them an inch, they take a mile. Amanda later texted that exact quote to Kevin. She added her own message. I honestly didn't know Sarah was secretly funding and managing this entire family. But honestly, Kevin, I am glad she left. She deserves better. Kevin didn't reply to his sister. For days, his insomnia spiraled out of control. Chloe told me mutual friends spotted Kevin's Audi parked outside my empty Brooklyn house at 3 a.m. almost every night. Sometimes he sat there for 30 minutes. Sometimes he sat there until the sun came up. But no matter how hard he looked, I was a ghost. I had severed every single tie. The only person he was allowed to speak to was Attorney Sterling. Rachel was starting to panic, too. Her grand plan was that once the annoying secret wife was out of the picture, Kevin's full attention and wealth would automatically revert to her. But the reality was the exact opposite. Kevin became a hollow shell. When she texted him to go out for expensive dinners, he replied he had no time. When she called him whining about her anxiety, he coldly told her to go see a therapist. When she posted dramatic, sad quotes on Instagram, he didn't even drop a pity like. Desperate to secure her position, Rachel started showing up at the Davis family estate. The first time, she brought expensive fruit and flowers, and Mrs. Davis was polite. The second time, Mrs. Davis casually asked Rachel to brew her special herbal tea. The third time, Mrs. Davis ordered Rachel to drive her to the hospital and sit in the waiting room. The smug smirk vanished from Rachel's face. She was used to being the delicate princess Kevin protected. She was completely unequipped to be the unpaid servant the Davis family required. On the day of the hospital visit, Rachel showed up in stilettos. Mrs. Davis viciously berated her in the lobby for not knowing how to navigate the complex insurance kiosks. Humiliated and furious, Rachel called Kevin, crying. Kevin's only response on the phone was a deadpan, exhaustion-laced whisper. Sarah always had the paperwork filled out 3 days in advance. Those 11 words shattered Rachel completely. Later that evening, Rachel texted me. "Sarah, you did this on purpose, didn't you? You deliberately made his mother entirely dependent on you just to trap them." I was sitting in my editing bay in Alaska, reviewing footage of a volcanic eruption, when the text came through. I typed a casual reply. "If you are too lazy to take care of her, just admit it. Don't blame me for being competent. If you don't want to do the work, the door is wide open." She fired back instantly. "I'm just trying to support a friend. Unlike you, I don't use a marriage certificate to hold Kevin hostage and force him to do things." I took a screenshot of her text, saved it to the folder, and named the file, "Rachel confesses to knowing about the marriage." She had no idea that those exact words were going to be used as nuclear evidence in a legal settlement. I didn't save them to prove she was an evil person. I saved them to establish a legal paper trail proving she actively and knowingly interfered in a legal marriage. That afternoon, Kevin finally capitulated and asked Attorney Sterling to schedule a Zoom mediation session. I agreed. When his camera turned on, Kevin looked like absolute hell. He had lost weight. Deep, bruised bags hung under his eyes. His suit looked slightly wrinkled. The moment he saw me on screen, his first words were, "You look healthy." I was sitting in the warm, wood-paneled office of my Alaskan cabin. The golden light from the desk lamp glowed against the white walls behind me. "Thank you," I said evenly. He stared at me through the webcam for a long time. "Are you really getting used to it up there? Are you not lonely?" I looked straight into the lens. "Kevin, we are here to discuss the divorce terms." His Adam's apple bobbed. Attorney Sterling took over, reading through the financial reimbursement clauses. Kevin surprisingly didn't fight back on most of the money. But when Sterling brought up the $8,800 wedding gift and the hospital bills, Kevin frowned. "I can pay the money back," Kevin said. "It's not that you can pay it back," I corrected him. "You must pay it back." His face darkened. "Sarah, we were husband and wife for 2 years. Do you really have to be this cold and transactional with me?" "You kept our marriage a secret for 2 years," I reminded him. "You never once publicly acknowledged me as your wife. But now, when it is time to pay your debts, suddenly you want to play the husband and wife card? You don't get to have it both ways, Kevin." He couldn't argue with that. But when Sterling brought up a non-disclosure and non-interference clause regarding Rachel, Kevin immediately spiked up. "Rachel has nothing to do with our marriage ending," Kevin snapped. "She had everything to do with it the second you put her in my passenger seat on I-95, I countered. "She had everything to do with it the second she started texting me photos of your car. She had everything to do with it the second she started calling me by my first name to mock me." I hit the share screen button on Zoom. The photo of Rachel sitting in his passenger seat blew up across the monitors. The warm yellow interior light of his Audi. Kevin's expensive jacket draped over her shoulders. The steaming Starbucks cup. And out the window, the blurry, freezing thunderstorm where I was standing. Kevin's face instantly went white. She sent this to you?" "I have plenty more," I said. I clicked to the next slide. "Sarah, it rained so hard last night. Did you make it home safe? Kevin said you were probably just blowing off steam." Click. "Next slide. You making this massive scene is completely exhausting, Kevin." Click. "Next slide. Unlike you, I don't use a marriage certificate to hold Kevin hostage." The presentation took less than a minute, but it was absolutely lethal. Kevin stared at his monitor, completely paralyzed. For the first time, the blinders were ripped off. The helpless, fragile, innocent ex-girlfriend who just needed a friend was exposed as a calculating, taunting victor who had been mocking his wife behind his back. He was finally seeing her two faces. Before Sterling could end the call, Kevin spoke, his voice barely a whisper. Sarah, I swear to God, I didn't know she was sending you these. Just because you didn't know doesn't mean the damage wasn't done, I said coldly. Whenever your family abused me, your excuse was always, I didn't know. Ignorance does not absolve you of responsibility, Kevin. His face looked like it was carved from ash. When the meeting formally concluded, he didn't log off right away. He looked at me through the screen. I know the truth now. It's too late, I said, and I clicked, leave meeting. That night, Kevin drove straight to Rachel's apartment. I don't know the exact details of what went down, but Chloe texted me the next morning saying a mutual friend saw Rachel running out of a downtown cafe, sobbing hysterically. Kevin was standing by the door, his face a mask of absolute disgust. Shortly after, Rachel sent me one final, furious text message. Are you happy now? You won. I replied with a single sentence. I didn't do this to beat you. I did this to free myself. Then I permanently blocked her. The next day, Kevin's sister, Amanda, sent me a friend request on Facebook. I hesitated, but accepted it. She immediately sent a long, heartfelt paragraph. Sarah, I'm so sorry. In our family, my mother banned us from calling you my sister-in-law, and I cowardly went along with it. Over the past few weeks, going through the bank statements, I realized you paid for my kids' gifts, my wedding, and countless hospital trips for my mom. I have no right to ask for your forgiveness, but I am truly, deeply sorry. I read it and replied, you don't need to apologize on their behalf. Just focus on your own kids and your own life. She sent one more message. Sarah, please be careful. My mother is organizing a massive Sunday family dinner next week. She invited all the extended relatives, Kevin's corporate friends, and even Rachel. She is planning an intervention to publicly humiliate you and twist the narrative so the family doesn't look bad for the divorce. Does Kevin know about this dinner? I asked. He knows, but he hasn't stopped it. I read that sentence, and the very last microscopic drop of pity I had for Kevin Davis evaporated into thin air. He knew, but he didn't stop it. That was Kevin in a nutshell. He would never push you off a cliff himself, but he would gladly stand by and watch his mother do it, claiming his hands were tied. Thank you for letting me know, I replied. I immediately emailed Attorney Sterling. Prepare the official public disclosure documents. We are attending the Davis family Sunday dinner. The day Kevin finally decided to fly to Alaska, a massive blizzard hit Fairbanks. I found out he was there because my landlord, an older Alaskan woman, knocked on my cabin door. She looked highly confused, holding a massive bouquet of white roses. Sarah, there is a man freezing his tail off at the end of the driveway. He claims he's your husband. I put down my coffee mug. He's my ex-husband. She raised an eyebrow. Soon to be, I clarified. Want me to throw these in the snowbank? She asked, gesturing to the roses. Leave them on the porch, I said. I will handle it. Tucked inside the bouquet was a handwritten card. Sarah, please. Just 5 minutes to talk. Kevin. I took a picture of the card for the legal file, then tossed both the card and the expensive white roses straight into the trash can outside. It wasn't that I was trying to be petty. I genuinely just felt nauseous looking at them. When I begged him for a shred of romance, he told me flowers were a waste of money. Now he was flying across the continent with roses to prove his devotion. Late love is worse than worthless, it's insulting. That afternoon, Attorney Sterling arranged the final legal showdown via Zoom. Kevin was sitting in a gloomy hotel room in Fairbanks, still wearing his heavy black winter coat. He looked completely shattered. I was sitting in Emma's bright, bustling production office, flanked by stacks of documentary footage. The Zoom screen was split 3 ways, me, Kevin, and Attorney Sterling in New York. The moment Kevin saw me, his voice cracked. I stood outside your cabin in a blizzard for 2 hours. You should really buy a warmer coat, I replied deadpan. He choked on his words. Do you really hate seeing my face that much? Yes. He stared at me, his eyes bloodshot. I flew 4,000 miles just to see you, Sarah. I looked back at him, my expression unmoving. When you told me to call an Uber on a flooded highway in a thunderstorm, I had a very long walk, too. From loving you with everything I had to feeling absolutely nothing for you, that was a very long journey. You just didn't care to watch me walk it. Sterling cleared his throat and formally began the proceedings. Kevin had completely given up fighting the financial reimbursements. He agreed to pay back every single cent. But right before the final sign-off, he made one desperate demand. I want 10 minutes alone with her in a private breakout room. Just 10 minutes. Sterling looked at me through the screen. Denied, I said. Kevin slammed his fist on his hotel desk. Sarah, you can't even give me 10 agonizing minutes? Kevin, I said softly, leaning into the microphone. For 2 years, I gave you thousands of 10 minutes. When your stomach hurt, I gave you 10 minutes. When your mother needed her meds, I gave you 10 minutes. When you needed to calm Rachel down, I gave you 10 minutes. When you asked me to hide our marriage in the shadows, I gave you 2 entire years of my life. I'm out of minutes. His eyes filled with tears. It wasn't the first time I had seen him cry, but it was the very first time I felt absolutely zero urge to comfort him. Sterling read the final decree. When he finished, Kevin suddenly crossed his arms. And what if I refused to sign? I had anticipated this. I pulled a secondary legal binder into the frame. If you refuse to sign today, we immediately transition to a public, at-fault litigation. I will officially file the financial ledger of your family's exploitation, the secret marriage contract you forced on me, the security footage of your mother harassing my former employer, and Rachel Hayes' text messages proving blatant marital interference into the New York State Public Court record. Kevin's voice spiked with sheer panic. You are going to take this to trial and make it a public circus? I'm not making a circus, I corrected him. I'm ending one. He stared at me in horror. Sarah, you used to hate drama. You hated causing a scene. I did, I agreed. Which is exactly why drama followed me every single day I was married to you. That single sentence shattered his last remaining delusion. He fell completely silent. After the Zoom call ended, my landlord knocked on the studio window. That guy is still out there, Sarah. I walked over to the frosted glass and looked out. Kevin was standing under a flickering street lamp across the snowy road. Snow was piling up on his dark coat. He was staring directly at the glowing window of my editing bay. In the past, just seeing him stand in the cold would have broken my heart into a million pieces. Now, all I felt was an urge to turn up the thermostat. I pulled out my phone and sent him a text. Leave the premises, or my landlord will call the Fairbanks police. He looked down at his phone. He stood frozen for a long time, his head bowed in the swirling snow. Finally, he looked back up at my window. We were separated by a pane of glass, a snowy street, and a universe of irreversible damage. Slowly, he turned around and walked away into the dark. I didn't feel a rush of victorious adrenaline. I just felt a deep, overwhelming exhaustion. That night, Chloe FaceTimed me from New York. Did he actually show up in Alaska? I nodded. She scoffed. Karma is beautiful. He should have treated you right when he had you. She paused, studying my face. Sarah, you aren't wavering, are you? I looked out the window at the empty, snow-covered road. No. How can you be so sure? I thought about it for a second. Because his tears right now aren't about realizing how badly he hurt me. He is crying because he lost someone who worshipped him. He is mourning his loss of control, not his loss of me. Chloe fell silent for a moment before smiling warmly. You really woke up, didn't you? Waking up is agonizing, I admitted. But once the pain fades, at least you can finally see the road ahead. Kevin flew back to New York the next morning. Before his flight took off, he sent me one last text. I will sign the papers. But are you going to show your face at the family dinner on Sunday? I will be attending in my own special way, I replied. What does that mean? He asked. I didn't explain. Because in some battles, you don't need to be physically present to win. The evidence speaks for you. The ledger speaks for you. The Davis family's grand Sunday dinner was set for 6 p.m. EST. On paper, it was supposed to be a belated celebration for Mrs. Davis's birthday. In reality, it was a carefully orchestrated tribunal meant to publicly execute my reputation. Amanda had texted me the guest list. Extended aunts and uncles, Kevin's elite corporate partners, and sitting right at the table, Rachel Hayes. The goal was clear. Mrs. Davis was going to cry over the roast beef, claim I was a gold digger who abandoned a dying old woman, and spin the divorce as Kevin escaping a toxic nightmare. They needed to publicly destroy me to protect their precious country club prestige. Fine. If they wanted a public spectacle, I was going to give them the Super Bowl. At exactly 6 p.m. in New York, it was early afternoon in Alaska. Attorney Sterling was physically sitting in the Davis family's massive dining room, acting as my legal proxy. He opened his laptop, connected it to the massive smart TV in the room, and initiated a Zoom call. I appeared on the screen, looking down at the entire Davis clan. Mrs. Davis was wearing a deep purple designer dress, though she looked gaunt and exhausted. Kevin sat next to her, staring at the table. Rachel was seated a few chairs away, wearing a modest, conservative dress, keeping her eyes glued to her plate. The extended relatives began murmuring the second my face popped up on the TV. Is she really in Alaska? I cannot believe a woman would be this ruthless. Kevin is so successful, what on earth is she complaining about? Mrs. Davis fired the first shot. She dabbed her dry eyes with a silk napkin and looked up at the camera. Sarah, if you have grievances with this family, spit them out in front of everyone. I looked back at her with a deadpan expression. Gladly. Mrs. Davis clearly hadn't expected me to be so blunt. She flinched, then immediately shifted into her victim act. You married into the Davis family for 2 years. I treated you like my own flesh and blood. Just because you had a silly spat with Kevin, how could you flee the state without a word? You know my heart is failing. If the public finds out what you did, how will this family ever show its face in polite society? Before I could even speak, Attorney Sterling stood up at the head of the table and unclasped his leather briefcase. Before my client responds, Mrs. Davis, I need a point of legal clarification, Sterling's booming voice echoed through the dining room. You just stated Sarah was married into the Davis family for 2 years. So, for the record, you are formally acknowledging the legal marriage between Sarah Miller and Kevin Davis? Mrs. Davis's face froze. The murmuring relatives instantly fell dead silent. Everyone knew the rumors of the secret marriage, but Kevin and his mother had fiercely denied it to their high society friends. Mrs. Davis's lips trembled. Well, of course. Excellent, Sterling pressed, taking a step forward. If you acknowledge the marriage, why did you mandate that Sarah be introduced exclusively as Kevin's coworker at every single family gathering for 24 months? Why was her name legally omitted from all of your son's public corporate bios? Why was Sarah banned from appearing in any family photographs? 3 rapid-fire questions. Mrs. Davis's face turned the color of spoiled milk. Kevin finally snapped. Mr. Sterling, this is a family dinner, not a cross-examination. I leaned into my webcam. Then answer the question. Kevin, do you acknowledge me as your wife in front of everyone in this room right now? Kevin looked up at the massive TV screen. Every single eye in the dining room turned to him. His Adam's apple bobbed violently. I acknowledge it, he whispered. Noted, I said. Sterling pulled a stack of papers from his briefcase. Since the marriage is now publicly recognized by the groom and his mother, let's review the marital financial contributions. Sterling tapped a button, and the smart TV switched from my face to a massive, high-definition spreadsheet. It was the ledger. The dining room erupted into shocked gasps as the itemized expenses scrolled up the screen in giant red font. 15,000 private hospital suite for Mrs. Davis, paid by Sarah Miller. 8,800 wedding gift check for Amanda Davis, paid by Sarah Miller. 24,000. 1 year of salary for the Davis family housekeeper. 1,500 executive physical exam for Kevin's father, paid by Sarah Miller. Every line item had a bank routing number, a date, and a highlighted receipt. Amanda's eyes filled with tears. She looked up at the TV and whispered, Sarah, I'm so sorry. Mrs. Davis tried to shout over the murmurs. Family shouldn't keep track of money like this. It is disgraceful. I stared at her through the camera. I wouldn't have kept track if you hadn't spent the last week running around New York screaming that I was a gold digger who stole your family's money. I'm just providing the audits you asked for. Mrs. Davis choked, her face flushing crimson. One of Kevin's wealthy uncles leaned back in his chair and muttered, She didn't steal our money. She was practically funding the house. No wonder she finally snapped and left. Mrs. Davis shot him a lethal glare, but the damage was done. Her prestige was actively burning to the ground. But Sterling wasn't finished. He clicked to the next slide. It was the screenshot of Kevin's text. "Okay. This," Sterling announced to the room, was Mr. Davis's immediate response when his wife asked for a divorce while stranded in a thunderstorm on the shoulder of Interstate 95. The dining room went graveyard silent. Mrs. Davis looked at Kevin in sheer horror. You texted her that?" Kevin looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. "Mom, at the time, I cut in, my voice booming through the TV speakers. "You were sitting in your heated car with your arms wrapped around Rachel Hayes, while I was standing in freezing rain." Sterling clicked to the final slides. The photo Rachel sent of herself in the passenger seat, wearing Kevin's jacket, holding a hot coffee. Then, the screenshots of her text messages. "Sarah, it rained so hard last night. Did you make it home safe? Kevin said you were probably just blowing off steam. You making this massive scene is completely exhausting, Kevin. Unlike you, I don't use a marriage certificate to hold Kevin hostage." A collective gasp sucked the air out of the room. Rachel's face turned paper white. She jumped out of her chair, her hands shaking. "No, that is out of context. I didn't." Sterling adjusted his glasses and looked at her. "Miss Hayes, this is a court-admissible digital forensic record. Are you claiming you perjured yourself by forging text messages?" Rachel burst into tears. "I didn't know their marriage was falling apart. I was just... "You weren't ignorant, Rachel," I said from the screen. "You knew exactly what you were doing. You just assumed I was too weak to ever fight back." Nobody at the table moved to comfort her. Not a single person defended her. Kevin sat at the head of the table, his face devoid of all blood. He finally saw it all laid bare. He saw the thunderstorm. He saw his cruel text message. He saw the sheer magnitude of the humiliation I had silently swallowed for 2 years to protect his family. Mrs. Davis made one last, desperate, pathetic attempt to save the narrative. Even if Kevin made a mistake, no wife abandons her family without a word. Every couple fights. I looked at the old woman through the screen. My voice was incredibly calm and incredibly light. "Mrs. Davis, this wasn't a fight. I was used by your family as a bank and a maid for 2 years, and then I was dumped on a flooded highway by your son. I refused to be used anymore." Mrs. Davis slumped back in her chair, utterly defeated. Sterling pulled the final, legally binding divorce decree from his briefcase and slapped a heavy Mont Blanc pen on top of it. He slid it across the mahogany table directly to Kevin. "Mr. Davis, you will sign this tonight, or we file the lawsuit tomorrow morning at 8 a.m., and all of these exhibits become public New York State records." Every eye in the room locked on to Kevin. He stared at the thick stack of papers for a long time. His hand was trembling so violently he could barely pick up the pen. He looked up at the TV screen, looking directly into my eyes. "If I sign this, there really is no going back, is there? We passed the point of no return on Interstate 95, I said. His eyes were bloodshot and brimming with tears, but I didn't blink. Finally, the tip of the pen hit the paper. He signed his name. The scratching of the ink was the only sound in the dead silent room. Rachel suddenly grabbed her purse, pushed her chair back, and practically ran out of the dining room. No one stopped her. She thought she had won a grand prize by stealing my seat, but all she won was a shattered, broken man and a family in ruins. Right before Sterling ended the Zoom call, Kevin looked up at the camera one last time. "Sarah." I looked at him. "I regret it. I regret everything." "I know," I said. A microscopic flicker of hope sparked in his eyes. "But your regrets have absolutely nothing to do with me anymore," I finished. And I clicked End Call. The screen went black. Right before the audio cut out, I heard Amanda whisper in the background, "Kevin, she is really never coming back." The divorce proceeded with lightning speed after Kevin signed. But Kevin didn't go quietly into the night. He started emailing me, every single day. The first email was about the day we met. He wrote about how I stayed up all night helping him translate a massive corporate proposal, and how he realized I was the only woman he could ever rely on. The second email was about our courthouse wedding. He swore he wasn't ashamed of me. He was just terrified of the pressure from his mother and his high society peers. The third email was about Rachel. He swore on his life that he felt nothing but guilt and pity for her, and that he never truly loved her again. I read every single email. Then I archived them without replying. Chloe asked me on FaceTime, "Why are you even reading them? Just block his email." "I'm reading them to remind myself," I said. "I'm reading them to see exactly how narcissistic his apologies are." In every single email, Kevin talked about how he felt. He felt pressure. He felt confused. He felt guilty. But he never once mentioned how freezing cold I was on that highway. He never once mentioned the sheer agonizing pain of watching him wrap his jacket around another woman. His apologies were entirely self-centered, an attempt to soothe his own guilt, not to heal my trauma. Changes swept through the Davis family. Mrs. Davis fell ill again, not a major heart attack, but a severe stress-induced collapse from losing the one person who silently managed her entire life. She actually emailed me once. She admitted she shouldn't have treated me like a servant and shouldn't have forced Kevin to hide the marriage. I forwarded the email to Sterling and didn't reply. It wasn't that I was cold-blooded. It was just that her apology wasn't real remorse. It was just the panic of a woman who realized she had to do her own laundry and deal with her own doctors. Rachel was gone, too. After the disastrous Sunday dinner, she and Kevin had an explosive fight. She screamed at him for humiliating her in front of his family. He screamed at her, asking why she maliciously sent me those photos. "I just wanted to see who you cared about more," Rachel had shrieked. Amanda told me about the fight later. Kevin apparently just went dead silent when Rachel said that, because the answer didn't matter anymore. Whoever he cared about more, he had lost me forever. Rachel packed her bags and moved out of New York shortly after. 2 weeks later, Attorney Sterling confirmed that Kevin had wired the massive lump sum reimbursing every single penny I had spent on his family over the last 2 years. He also offered a substantial alimony payout to cover emotional distress. I refused the alimony. I only took back the exact amount of money that was originally mine. "Are you sure you don't want the distress payout?" Sterling asked. "He's practically begging to pay it." "I'm sure," I replied. I refuse to let him buy his way out of the guilt of that thunderstorm. He doesn't get to swipe a credit card and feel like we are even. Sterling stayed quiet for a moment. "Understood, Sarah. You have won." On the day the New York judge finalized the divorce decree, I drove out to a secluded Alaskan beach. The Arctic wind was ferocious. I wore a heavy parka, holding my phone in my gloved hand. The PDF on the screen read, "Marriage dissolved. 2 years of agonizing trauma, legally terminated in 2 simple words." I stood on the rocky shoreline, raised my phone, and took a picture of the crashing gray waves. I didn't add a caption. I just texted it to Chloe. She replied instantly, "Happy Independence Day, Sarah Miller. You are single." I laughed out loud, the sound carrying over the howling wind. Sarah Miller. Not Mrs. Davis. Just me. During my first month of true freedom, I built a quiet, beautiful routine. 3 days a week at the editing studio, 2 days working from my cabin. On weekends, I took local photography classes. I FaceTimed Chloe, and she kept telling me I was literally glowing. "I'm not exaggerating," she said. "You used to look like a guitar string pulled so tight it was about to snap. Now, you actually look like a living, breathing human being." It was true. For 2 years, my entire existence was reduced to waiting. Waiting for Kevin to come home. Waiting for his mother to call with a demand. Waiting for Rachel to disappear. Waiting for the day I would finally be allowed to exist in public. Waiting destroys your soul. Now, I wasn't waiting for anyone. I was just living. Kevin's emails slowly decreased from once a day, to once a week, to once a month. I never replied to a single one. One day, he sent a photo. It was the shoulder of Interstate 95, bathed in bright, sunny afternoon light. "I parked here and stood outside for 3 hours yesterday," the email read. I looked at the photo, archived it, and felt absolutely zero pity. A time machine does not exist. Him standing in the sun today could never erase how freezing cold I was that night in the rain. Amanda texted me a few weeks later. She said Mrs. Davis had finally learned how to log into her own medical portal. Kevin finally learned what beta blockers his mother took. His father finally learned how to pay the new housekeeper on time. The Davis family was finally learning how to survive without me. It was deeply ironic. They didn't need me to survive. They were just too lazy and entitled to do the work themselves while I was around. That's good for them, I texted back. Sarah, can I still call you my sister? Amanda asked. I thought about it for a second. You can just call me Sarah. She sent a crying emoji. Sarah, I hope you have the most beautiful, wonderful life. You too, Amanda. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, my documentary project officially premiered. It was a stunning visual piece about the migration of Arctic birds through North Atlantic storms. When the screen faded to black, the credits rolled. Lead editor, Sarah Miller. No title. No husband's name attached. Just my name, standing strong on its own. I sat in the studio screening room, and my eyes suddenly grew hot. Emma sat next to me, handing me a mug of hot cider. Brilliant work, Sarah. Thank you, I whispered. My phone lit up in my pocket. A text from Kevin. I saw the online premiere of the documentary. Your name was in the credits. Congratulations, Sarah. I'm so proud of you. For the first time in 6 months, I didn't archive it. I typed 3 simple words. Thank you, Kevin. It was the first time I had replied to him since the divorce, and I knew it would be the absolute last. A clean period at the end of a very long, very painful sentence. He immediately texted back, a desperate flurry of bubbles. Sarah, did you really reply? Can we please just be friends? Can we at least talk? I looked at the message, locked the screen, and put the phone in my pocket. Some people can never be your friends because the wounds they inflicted were too deep. The fact that I no longer hated him was the absolute maximum amount of grace he would ever receive from me. When winter fully set in, the Alaskan nights grew incredibly long. One evening, Emma announced that the aurora borealis was going to be highly visible. After work, a group of colleagues and I drove out to a remote, pitch-black valley outside Fairbanks. The snow crunched under my heavy boots. The air was so cold it burned my lungs, but it was incredibly crisp and pure. Someone handed me a thermos of hot chocolate. I took a sip, the warmth spreading through my chest. As we stood in the snow, waiting for the lights, my mind drifted back to the thunderstorm on I-95. The freezing rain, the box of medicine in my hand, the red taillights of Kevin's Audi driving away. Back then, I thought I was being abandoned. Now, standing under the massive Alaskan sky, I realized I hadn't been abandoned at all. I had been ejected from a crashing plane. If he hadn't left me on that highway, I would probably still be trapped in that luxury Manhattan apartment, waiting for a man to give me permission to exist, slowly fading until I was nothing but a ghost. My phone vibrated in my heavy parka. A text from Chloe. Breaking news. Kevin officially sold the Manhattan apartment and moved out today. A mutual friend said that after the movers took the last box, Kevin just sat on the bare floor of the living room for 4 straight hours. He looked completely dead inside. I looked at the text. I felt a fleeting sense of melancholy, like reading the tragic end of a book about a stranger. I typed back, I hope he finally wakes up and figures out how to live. Chloe replied, You're way too nice. I hope he steps on a Lego every day for the rest of his life. I laughed out loud, my breath pluming in the freezing air. I'm not being nice, Chloe. I just don't want to waste a single ounce of my energy hating him anymore. Hate is just another form of attachment. I don't need it. At exactly 11 p.m., the northern lights appeared. It started as a faint, ghostly ribbon of neon green cutting across the pitch-black sky. Slowly, it expanded, rippling and cascading like a massive, glowing ocean wave directly above our heads. The entire valley fell dead silent in absolute awe. I tilted my head back, and suddenly, tears spilled over my eyelashes. I wasn't crying for Kevin. I wasn't crying for the past. I was crying because I had finally made it to the exact place I was always meant to be. It took 2 agonizing years, a secret marriage, a thunderstorm, and a shattered heart. But I made it. I took off my right glove. On my middle finger rested a simple, elegant silver ring I had bought for myself at a local artisan shop in Fairbanks. It wasn't a wedding band. It was a promise. Engraved on the inside were 4 simple words. I belong to me. I pulled out my phone and snapped a picture of the majestic green aurora blazing in the sky. I texted it to Chloe with the caption, "I finally saw the lights." She replied instantly, "Welcome home, Sarah." I smiled. Welcome home. Not to New York. Not to a luxury apartment. Not to a man who didn't know how to love me. I had finally come home to myself. The wind howled across the frozen tundra, biting and fiercely cold, but I was no longer shivering. I stood tall under the brilliant, dancing lights of the Alaskan sky, and for the first time in a very long time, I didn't look back. There was absolutely nothing behind me worth turning around for. My entire life was finally, beautifully, straight ahead.